For me, it's about being of service. It's about creating community, living an experience that is one of growth, adventure, family, real authentic connection. Real authentic connection is important. I would say for people to get to a place of trust where they can take a deep breath, and if you are just trying to rush as fast as you possibly can into the next thing, then most likely you're going to end up right back where you started.
Joseph Campbell said, "The cave we fear to enter holds the treasures you seek." I think this is a very interesting thing to think about as we jump into today's conversation with my guest, Jonathan Binder. Jonathan has had a terrific career throughout his post-MBA days in the world of marketing and industries and health and fitness. And he's joining us today to explore this concept among many other things. And it's a concept he introduced to me, this entering the cave and finding the treasures that we seek. I'm your host, AJ Jones. Thank you so much for joining us for a nice conversation today. I appreciate you investing your time with us. I'm excited to hear what John has to say. John, welcome to Code 3, Life Reinvented.
Well, hey, AJ. Awesome to be here.
This is a conversation that should be a lot of fun because you and I have had a lot of soul level conversations over the last couple of years. That much I know. And I've always appreciated the level of honesty and rawness and vulnerability you bring to what you do, I think, and how you live your life. And you share it so willingly. And I think it really is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So let's jump into this. John, I'll throw it to you. Have you had a Code 3 moment?
Yeah, I have. So yeah, as you mentioned, I was in the health and wellness industry. I always prided myself on being healthy. And yet for me, my wake-up call was having a health crisis. And I started having what I thought were heart attacks or heart issues, heart palpitations, and they felt quite significant. Over the course of 4 or 5 years, I probably made 6 or 7 trips to the emergency room to get checked out. Never in an ambulance. I would always take myself or have my wife take me. But I would say the big wake-up call that took it from something that I was just trying to address with maybe doing a little meditation, maybe watching my diet, trying to do all the tests to see what could be going on. They couldn't find anything. But one day, my wife and 2 kids, they were probably 10 or 12 years old, we were driving up to Tahoe from the Bay Area. And I'm driving, just excited to get up to the snow to go skiing and going 75 miles an hour on the freeway. And all of a sudden I can feel my heart going into this kind of really out of beat, and kind of almost like it was beating out of my chest. And I was like, what is going on? And I started to panic because I'm thinking I might be having a heart attack and crashing the car. Fortunately, I made it over to the side of the road. And that was the first time I had a full-blown panic attack. The reality that I could have seriously injured us or worse was staring me right in the face. That was my big wake-up call. This wasn't something that I could ignore any longer because this pattern was only increasing in frequency.
Well, I'm really glad that it did not result in an ambulance ride. And I know how terrifying and unsettling all that can feel like. Ultimately, was there anything wrong with the heart?
Yeah. So of course, I wanted to get checked out again, and maybe this time they find the one thing that was physically going on. And no, I mean, I have a very slow heart rate. So it's like bradycardia, which just means an extra slow heartbeat. They did halters. They would find out every once in a while, like a slight arrhythmia, but there was nothing in terms of, did the calcium test, did all the things. And while that was reassuring, what it did is I had to come to the conclusion that it wasn't something physical, but really confront that this was emotional, and really started to wake up to that it was more of a spiritual crisis. And so that was really the beginning to stop looking for the quick fix, whether it's a supplement or the diet or whatever it was, the short meditations in the morning, but to really go on a deep journey to understand what was happening inside, because the switch was, this was happening to me. Like, why am I so unlucky that this was kept happening? For a while after that experience, I developed severe anxiety. I was afraid to drive anyone else in the car because I thought this might happen again. I also developed a little vertigo. So there was about a 6-month period where I was in really kind of a deep crisis. And the interesting thing was, I tried to hide it from everybody. I didn't want to let people know what I was going through. I didn't want to freak out my family. I was prescribed Xanax. I hated taking that medicine because it would completely knock me out. But I would put like a little pill in my, that front jean pocket, the little tiny pocket, whatever that's called. And I'd have one in there. And I went through a whole bottle, not because I was taking them, but because then they get thrown in the wash. Right. So I couldn't leave the house. That was like my, in case of emergency, break glass. But I just knew that wasn't the path I wanted to take, which was to live in a constant state of anxiety, wondering when this next panic attack or heart palpitation would happen. So it really forced me to start looking at, why is this happening for me? And that really took me on my path of getting in touch with who I am, what's going on here.
And all the people I've had the good fortune of knowing in my life, you certainly are someone who has gotten in touch with themselves. It's incredibly admirable, your commitment and the journey that you've been walking on, I think. So that's why I'm so happy to have you on the show. John, like, just to peel this one back a little more, first of all, you didn't want to share this with anybody. Like, why not?
This all relates to that quote, because that quote is a quote I shared with you when we first met. And what I came to realize is my success formula that I adopted early on was to be the one who everything was cool. Everything was okay. I don't want to make any waves. I don't want to cause stress for anyone else. A lot of biting my tongue, a lot of putting on an external appearance that, hey, things are cool, but would stuff the emotions, the challenging conversations, the truth inside. And the truth was, I wasn't okay. I remember finally telling my wife, I'm like, I don't think I'm okay. And she's like, yeah, I know. So we think, oftentimes I see this a lot, we think we're hiding and protecting other people from what's going on inside. And the ones closest to us know that we're suffering. That was another big component of it.
It's amazing that we have this capacity or reflex maybe to put up that wall or put on that masks that everything's fine. And when it's not. And when I came back to work after my first heart attack, it was remarkable the amount of people who came into my office, closed the door, sat down and shared with me their health crisis that they were going through. These people I'd worked with for years, and I had no clue that this is something that they were wrestling with. In a way, I think it's really sad. And I guess I can appreciate why people would want to protect themselves and protect their identity. And but at the same time, that also thinks that drives a wedge of suffering into your soul, because you can't get the support and be open about what's really, really bugging you and hurting you and could be a risk to your health and life even. I get it. You had a great career in big VP of marketing type roles with some really cool organizations like TRX, right? You're big into the fitness arena. You got your MBA from Haas, great program. When you came out, you got your MBA, kind of, what was your view of the world? What were you hoping to achieve now that you got your MBA? What did the world look like and feel like to you?
The reason I went to go get my MBA was to prove myself. Before that, I was working for a real estate development company that no one had ever heard of. And it was cool. I actually really enjoyed my role there and I was proud of it, but I knew I wanted to do something more. And so for me, applying to business school was like going to be a transition, and it was going to get my passport stamped. Like, I'm worthy of being respected, of getting a more important job. So I was on this path of proving myself from a standpoint of what I thought success meant. And maybe that at the time was I wanted to work for shift industries. So I knew I didn't want to be in the real estate industry. But I could tell when I was at business school, there was a part of me, if I look back on it, was like, I don't really belong here. I was really trying to prove to myself that I did. I didn't have a lot of people at Haas at the time had come from an Ivy League university, undergrad, were working at investment banks before or consulting companies. And I went to UC Santa Barbara, did okay at undergrad. The way I think I got in was through my story. And I was passionate at the time of making a difference. This was a time where I believed in sustainable business, mission-based business. That's what I was really passionate about at the time, is how can I combine business with doing something I'm passionate about and making a difference? But I could also feel the comparison and the ego part of myself, who was wondering if I was worthy of being there. Do I even belong here? Interestingly enough, I remember the last year going to a venture capital presentation where they're saying how you can raise money from venture capitalists. And they're just saying, hey, don't ask for 5 million, ask for 20 million. All you need to show is the market size and that you're going to get X% of it. And I just remember thinking to myself, this does not make any sense. It feels like I could feel the bubble about to burst, and it did right when I graduated. So I graduated into the .com bust. Those kind of tech companies, they weren't hiring. It didn't quite work out the way I was planning it to be honest. Like all things, it eventually did. And I found my industry in the health and wellness space, where I was for almost 20 years. And I can see how it's come full circle now in that area of wellness, which I think at first, I'll just say, my first company, TRX, is all about physical health, right? How to get stronger, more flexible. And I thought that's really the key to well-being, was just to get your body physically well. And then the next stop was at a company that was more about the biological health. We did direct-to-consumer blood testing. And now I realize as I was getting older, no, it's really about nutrition, sleeping, that approach. And this last crisis is moving into the area of spiritual and emotional well-being. But I see they're all connected.
That's great that you can see that through line when you look back, like, oh, hey, actually, I think this all makes sense. And it's as opposed to like, hey, what was that about? And what am I doing here? Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. And so going back to how we started talking about your code 3 moment, you had heart issues causing you a lot of stress. You were going on Xanax. You're not telling anybody. What happened next?
I was trying to figure it out all on my own. I was listening to the podcasts, doing some meditation. It was all done with a level of shame, I'd say. I was trying to keep this quiet. My approach was, let me figure this out, get better, and then I can tell people about how I came out the other side. And it wasn't working. It definitely wasn't working. For me, the breakthrough, I would say, was an unexpected invitation from someone who was advising me to try a different approach. Because I said, I don't know what to do. I don't want to do the pharmaceutical approach anymore. And he said, well, would you be open to something more experiential? And I said, at this point, anything. He introduced me to psychedelic therapy. That first session just made all the difference, because what it allowed me to see was, one, I wasn't broken. I think I had this belief that I had something wrong with me. There was something fundamentally the circuitry was broken on the inside. And through that experience, I saw that everything is good and pure and whole inside. It's like having an iPhone screen protector that's cracked. So I was looking through a cracked lens. The underlying picture was whole and intact. And so for me, that was the big exhale that, okay, I got this. And that really began a deeper journey of self-exploration.
I don't know if the timing is quite in line here, but where you and I met was actually a really cool event. I'm trying to remember what year it was. Was that 2021? In kind of early days of COVID, we did not know each other. And a mutual friend of ours put together this really cool backyard event where we had 8 minutes to tell a story. So it was a storytelling event in her backyard. And I think there were about 6 or 7 of us got a chance to tell our stories. You and I were 2 of those people. I remember listening to your story and how heartfelt it was and how genuine it was. And I just wanted to come up and meet you after the event and just sort of introduce myself. You remember that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's something that I never would have done prior to, going on this path. So we skipped over one part that I'll quickly share is, I guess the first phase of my awakening, which I would say was just really about healing, about just, okay, letting go of shame, connecting that, I'm worthy of being loved, realizing that I've been following a path of trying to prove myself in the business world. When I was at a startup that I thought was going to be, this is the last startup I can really land. They had some problem raising the next round. And so I was let go. And at that point, I was like, I can't do this startup thing anymore. Like the startup thing for me had turned into a roulette wheel of trying to prove myself. And I'm like, I need to really understand who I am. So serendipitously, I had come across a program about purpose discovery. And I did that. It was a very intense inner journey for about 3 months. And it involved going on a vision quest and something I would never have considered before. That was the process of really looking at my values, looking to my vision, looking into and feeling into what was truly important versus thinking, and distinguishing that dynamic between what I like to frame up as my mind versus my heart. And so that was really a process of connecting to my heart. And yes, that process that I realized I wanted to support and guide others in a similar journey. That's when I discovered that quote of "The cave we fear to enter holds the treasures we seek." One of the things I feared the most was sharing my truth. I like to make people laugh. I like to be entertaining. I like to share information. I love sharing knowledge and information with people, but to be vulnerable and authentic, that was incredibly scary for me. So yes, when we were invited to that storytelling, my initial reaction was hell no. Like now I've reminded myself that anytime I'm presented with something that scares me, that might be a guidepost. And so I leaned into that, and it was every time I do, it always creates a breakthrough. And one of them was meeting you, and we wouldn't have been here had I not decided to lean into that. So
exactly. And I think I got there through a different path, but same sort of idea. Who wants to hear what I have to say? I'd never wanted to put my stuff out on social media really at all. It's fairly private in that regard for most of my adult life until things went down for me. And then it was like, well, what can I share that would be helpful to people? And to your point, the more I did that, it got a little more comfortable each successive time, whether it was in a blog post or a podcast or public talk or this backyard barbecue, you realize, wow, it's not only cathartic immensely for me, the sharer, but the feedback I get, and I'm sure you have as well, and others that share their stories, is pretty profound. I have a cousin or a brother or a family member who's going through something similar, or I went through this, or wow, that shaped the way I view the world differently, whatever it is. For those who are listening and contemplating this, like that can be a little scary. There is no doubt. And make sure you've got the right audience for what you're willing to share. But you could change one person's life. Imagine the ripple effect of that by sharing your story. You did something that has inspired me more than you know. You kind of made a radical family decision and moved.
Yes, we did. So that was a place I thought I'd live the rest of my life.
Same.
Yeah. And now I'm living over in Portugal, and I can't believe it's been 3 years since we moved. But it was interesting how this all unfolded. When Tanya, my wife, and I first met, or early on in our relationship, you share what our life vision's about and what we love doing. And we both realized we love traveling. I had lived in France my junior year of college, and then Tanya had lived down in Chile after graduating. Once we knew that we were going to get married, we talked about, wouldn't it be cool to live abroad? Wouldn't it be fun to do that? Fast forward, marriage and kids, and we moved up to Marin, and we were just on the conveyor belt. Things were moving along, comfortable from the outside. I started having my health issues. And I would say it was really in 2020 during the pandemic, the beginning part of it actually was amazing. Even though there's a crisis going out, just to be just with my family those first few months. But soon then I could feel, because the lockdown, I started just feeling this need to spread my experience and to look for, really had me contemplating, what do I really want? And this is in the context of the vision I wanted to create with my family. And I knew for me, adventure was and growth were really important values. And I just remembered that those earlier conversations with my wife about living abroad. But at this point, my son was a freshman in high school. My daughter was in 8th grade. At the same time, my wife was going through a really significant health crisis. The circumstances were such that as I was feeling this desire to go on a year abroad, all the circumstances were just saying, hey, it's too late. You should have figured this out when they were younger. My son was very serious about high school. My daughter was just getting into her groove with her friends. My wife was having some challenges. And a big part of me was like, hey, you missed your window. That feeling was only getting stronger and stronger. And so I would say for about a year, I was wrestling with this. And I would mention it to my wife. I would float the idea at dinner with my kids, and I'd get eye rolls and like, sure, Dad, I don't think that's going to happen. But I couldn't ignore it. And I would say, finally, in January of 2022, I had to get clear. Like one of the approaches I take with my clients is to do a vision letter, which is to imagine yourself in the future you want to be experiencing, right as if it's already happened. So I did that. I could imagine everything about it. I knew the geography of the place I wanted to live. I knew the kind of neighborhood, the people we were with, but I had no clue where it was. Portugal was not on the radar at all. I thought it might be Costa Rica or Mexico. But then that's when my wife's health troubles really kind of kicked into high gear. I just kind of resigned myself at that point that it wasn't meant to be. And maybe this is something we do when the kids graduate from high school. Beginning of May of that year, I had another really strong, I was meditating and I just had this super deep, all I could call is a download, a message, inner voice saying, it's time to go. It's time to go. And I was arguing with this voice. You can't, it's too late. My wife, it's just trust. Fast forward a week later, out of the blue, someone mentioned Portugal. And I just knew that Portugal was the place after I looked it up because it matched my vision letter to the T. And we moved here 3 months later, sight unseen. It was a huge, biggest leap of faith I've ever taken. And it's just had amazing kind of ripple effect.
I don't know, I find it so remarkable. And you shared your journey on, I think it was Facebook, right after that barbecue storytelling. I followed you and I just was fascinated. Like, wow, kids in middle school. I didn't know anything about your wife's situation, but I'm just like, how does this work? And just go sight unseen to just throw a dart at a map, not quite what you did, but go with me here and go there. And you've been there since. And for all accounts, I understand you and I've talked about this a bunch of times. It's going really well, right? And the kids are happy and adjusted. And if you're listening and wondering gosh, that sounds like something I'd love to do, or it resonates because you've been contemplating it. I think that John has an incredible success story around it. I mean, is there any regrets there that you have, or how would you describe where you're at with it?
No, just complete deep gratitude and amazement for what's unfolded. I mean, let me just say, back up, we flew out 5 days before we flew out, and it was a rush job to pack up the house. The agreement I had with my family was we will try this for a year. And if everyone wants to move back, I was okay with it. But 5 days before we flew out, my wife had to go in for a procedure. She was going in. She had been to the hospital 8 times since the beginning of 2022. She went in for a procedure, and this one, without getting into the gory details, but it was a more significant one. In hindsight, it doesn't make any sense how we actually flew, but we landed. We moved into an Airbnb. We didn't know where we were going to be staying yet. We still had to figure that out. And my wife was miserable. She was really suffering. My daughter had just had her first kiss, like the day before we left. She didn't want to be there. And we weren't in the nicest part of Lisbon where our Airbnb was. And so here, just a few months before, I had this deep knowing that this is exactly the right thing to do. And now I lay in, and a few days in, I wondered, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? I'm like, this isn't what I imagined it to be. And then literally this part of me thinking, how do we undo this? But we had people who had moved into had a year lease. And I just had to remember trust. Like I think what I've noticed is that when you take a leap of faith, we expect to have the trapeze just right there to catch immediately, or whatever the analogy is, right? We want it just to show up. And oftentimes that fall into the unknown goes a lot farther than what you want. And this was one of those cases where it took a few months to start getting back on track. Just to fast forward, in February of the next year, we had to decide, like, because the schools were in there saying, hey, if you want to re-up, you got to re-up, or we give your spot away. The family was like, we want to stay, which is surprising. My daughter is like, I love it here. My son was like, okay, let's do this. And right then we knew that if we were going to do that, we would be here through the kids being in high school. So the amazing thing is my wife was really kind of underweight, and she hasn't been to a hospital since. She's like, her symptoms, her situation, she's almost fully recovered, energetic. She has a few little complications, but if she was at a 5 out of 10 on the health, she's at a 9 out of 10 on the health.
I love to hear that
spectrum. And now my son just went to university in England that he never would have done. And we just talked to him right before we got on the call, and he's a few days in, and he's like, couldn't be happier. So yeah, I'm just super blessed.
Amazing. And I got to ask, like, your heart stuff is all good?
Yeah, like all that. What I've come to notice for me is that I've had a few issues here and there where I can feel something, but now I just know it's emotional. It's energetic. It shows up for me as something that kind of could feel disconcerting. And I go and I get my regular checkups, and I have a clear bill of health. But I know, like, I need to pay attention to that. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and I'm a big believer that our body isn't fighting against us. It's trying to let us know there's something we have to pay attention to.
No truer words have been said. I love hearing that about you and your wife, and your health has recovered. And it was a source of inspiration for me, quite frankly, for our move from the Bay Area / Marin County, which I agree, we never ever thought we'd leave. 2 years ago, if we had this conversation, I probably would have told you, or I did, to pound sand. Absolutely no way. We're never leaving. But anyways, now we find ourselves in coastal North Carolina, and really sort of enjoying the change and inspired by you. But I think a key point here is the way you were thinking about things. To me, I was hearing about living abroad and traveling. It felt like a someday, right? Well, someday, or maybe we missed it. You made your someday right next to today, and you pulled it close to you and made it happen. And I think that's incredibly admirable, and a key takeaway, and something, at More, which you and I are going to talk about here in a minute, is helping people get to that, make that someday closer to today and start living the life you want, because there is no preseason to the game of life. We're in it. There's one lap around the track. We don't know where our respective finish line will be. Might as well just do the things that pique your curiosity, passion, and desires to explore the world and make the most out of our precious time here. So it's incredibly admirable.
For sure.
I always refer to you when talking about this stuff, like, hey, he did it, and he just went sight unseen and not too much planning, just went for it, and it's turned out great.
Before this, I was someone who had to really be strategic. I was in strategic marketing, strategic planning, and I always wanted to know the 5 steps to get to the outcome I wanted. And I wouldn't take a risk unless I knew for sure I was going to succeed. In certain circumstances, that makes sense, but it's not a way to live. For me, it wasn't a way to live a fulfilling life. And it was out of balance with a lot of my values around learning and growth. Because if you already know the outcome, then you're not really growing. And the other thing I had to overcome was this belief of, oh, it's too late. It's too late. That was a huge one for me because there's that one of the things we learn in business school is the sunk cost fallacy, which is, well, I've invested 20 years in a business career. It'd be silly to throw it all away on something risky. In business school, it's probably the biggest lesson, which is hard for most people to do, is to say, if I had to make this choice today, would I choose to stay in this career that's unfulfilling, or in this, lifestyle, or whatever it is that isn't working for you? Would you stay in it, or would you choose a new path? And for me, when I connected to, I want to help people, there's a big part of me that says it's too late. Like, you should have been a psychology major in college. This is something you should have figured out a long time ago. That's probably one of the hardest things for people to come to terms with, is it's never too late. It's never too late. If you landed in this moment right now, would you keep going down this path, or would you, knowing that it's going to only lead to, more unfulfillment, or would you choose a new path? And for me, yeah, it just keeps showing up over and over again that it's never too late.
It is never too late. We both are quite entrepreneurial at our ripe old ages, if you will. I don't want to be Pollyannish and do the carpe diem, but my preference is, if it's the context of growing versus autopiloting, I prefer growth all day long. I'll take that all day, every day, even with the roller coaster ride that often accompanies that path. So now you're in Portugal, your family's super settled and loving it. You left the place you never thought you'd leave, Marin County, beautiful place to be in many ways. If you live there in the Bay Area, it's a sense of you've made it and all this stuff. Just full disclosure, you are an affiliated coach with More and what we're building at More. For those of you who don't know about More, we're building a destination for accomplished professionals at crossroads who are ready to redefine what's possible. And John has been very instrumental in helping me move this forward and bring it to market. And he's an active coach on our platform. And we do have some tremendous coaches who are affiliated with what we're building there. John, let's dive into this concept. How do you start redefining success and fulfillment now? What does that look like for you?
Well, for me, it's this distinction between the success metrics that we are given or unconsciously adopt versus the ones that we discover and choose. And so once again, there's lots of different ways of framing it. In the framework that I learned, there's your default purpose, right? So for my example, my default purpose was to be a good person. And for me, that being a good person was to not rock the boat, make people happy, to be successful in that traditional sense of get a good job where I got recognition and esteem and the financial payoff. Many people, I believe, are following a vision of success that isn't theirs. Maybe they adopted it from their parents or society or their culture. And now I believe success is being the best version of, in a nutshell, it's being the best version of me. And so that's a journey of understanding and connecting to who I truly am underneath the exterior programming that I had taken on, and rediscovering what's indigenous to me. What are my true values? What am I about? And so, yeah, it looks very, very different. It looks very different. And I feel like I'm letting go, and I've let go of the need to prove myself to other people, to get other people's approval, to impress. Yeah, it's much more about, for me, it's about being of service. It's about creating community and just living an experience that is one of growth, adventure, family, and real authentic connection. Real authentic connection is important. I take ownership. I didn't allow myself to be fully seen because of my own fears. So, yeah, so it's amazing what happens when you yeah, create your own benchmarks of what success is. And it's different for everybody. I think that's the big thing is when you get down to it, it's really different for everyone.
Powerful. These fears get in the way of us being authentically true to ourselves. And that's a magic word for me, that A word. Authenticity is so vital. Once you tap into that and honor it and let it free, and so much fulfillment and joy can come from that. And it takes some courage at times, depending on your environment, certainly in a professional sense. But it's liberating. What are some big learnings about your process as you've made the shift in your life and career? Are there any top aha learnings?
I think the first big area is getting clear about what truly matters, like what really matters beyond the conditioning. A lot of people have some vision of financial or professional success, for example, or they want to live in a house in the suburbs with kids, and that it's very outside in. For me, it's for myself going in and say what actually really matters. What's the feeling? What's the energy I want to experience without getting caught up in the external, what that might look like. And so when I'm working with people, one of the first things is to help people get clear on a vision that is a layer deeper than the external trappings. So what are your core values? What's the vision? What's truly, truly important? What does your heart really want to experience in this precious life that we have? That's the first big bucket. Is without knowing for a long time, I would say, a big part of our program at More and the work I do is helping people connect with this word that we're hearing a lot of is purpose. And purpose is a very multi-layered concept. And I used to think the purpose is just what you do. I think this is more true for men in general, that the purpose is it's their job, right? And that's the conversation that a lot of, first time you meet someone, what do you do? Mm-hmm. And that becomes your identity, that becomes your value. And it's something I've had to confront because people, I just got back from a retreat where everyone, there's the president or very successful in a career. And there's a few of us who are like, oh, I'm being a dad. Right now I'm being a coach, or I'm in transition. And for us to get clear about that's actually true versus, making up some stuff about, I consult, or that LinkedIn, giving your LinkedIn profile versus who we truly are and what we're about is challenging. So it's a hard one for people to reconcile, is that we aren't our job title. Mm-hmm. And especially when we're a stage of transition, because then it feels like we don't have an identity.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, God, that's such a good point. When you're in transition, you don't have that identity. So what's the advice?
Right. So you just want to get out of it.
Get me out, get me back to a job. I can at least anchor on that. Let's go one step further on that, John. So if people who are in some form of transition/transformation, not anchored to a career and that identity, what should they anchor to?
Well, this is, I think, the paradox of it all, which is, and I was on this hamster wheel for a long time, is because I loved working at early stage companies. Those aren't the most stable or secure in your career path. So whether I was consulting or working in a company and it was time to move on, it's just a rush to get to the next one as fast as possible without taking a breath and really tuning into what do I really want right now? I would say for people to get to a place of trust where they can take a deep breath. And if you are just trying to rush as fast as you possibly can into the next thing, then most likely you're going to end up right back where you started, but just some more time has gone by. And it doesn't, nothing changes in that process. But if you can take the space to really lean into these deeper questions and do some introspection and get quiet, I would say I used to always look for answers. Let me look at the podcast. Let me do the the Myers-Briggs is all this external process, but it's only when I took the space to really go deep. And for everyone, that could be different. It could be walks in nature. It could be meditation. It could be, for me, going on a structured program. That was essential. And being in community, I would say a big part of it was get surrounded by people going on a similar path. Because when you're surrounded by people that are just, chugging away on autopilot, as you say, it's really hard to change, and you're not supported. And so community, I think, is a huge part of this. And to admit, like, hey, I could use some guidance right now. And I believe that guidance isn't advice. A lot of people will give you advice. Oh, you should do this or you should do that. And what had the biggest impact for me is, what do you really want? And really sink into those questions and create some space there.
So a couple last questions here. What has held you back in this journey for you? How did you move through it?
I'm still working through, and like everything, it's layers and layers and layers of moving. For me, that quote that we started off with, the cave we fear to enter holds the treasures we seek. My vision was, it's just one cave. And if I conquer my fears and go into that cave, then I'm set. Well, the reality is you go into that cave and it's like a Russian nesting doll. There's another cave right behind that cave. Yep. And there's another cave right behind that cave. And so for me, the biggest fear was being authentically seen and speaking my truth. And in this journey, as I mentioned earlier, it was moving from a health crisis to an emotional crisis to really a spiritual crisis. I'm very aware of how I used to judge people who I perceived as a little woo and out there. And the story I told at that storytelling event we were both at was about running away from organized religion, and at a young age, and choosing that, hey, this does not resonate. And for me, I did not resonate with the structure of organized religion. In this case, it was Catholicism. And then I threw away the deeper connection to anything kind of spiritual. So I became very scientific and logical and mental. And this process for me has been really connecting to my heart. In the beginning of sharing some of these, what I was going through, it was the fear of being judged and shunned, and saying, well, people know me this one way. If I start sharing my truth and what I'm going through, am I going to be shunned or judged? As someone who, my whole life was about being accepted and not rocking the boat and being the peacemaker. Yeah, that was why my biggest fear was being authentic. Because what if this upsets people? What if people don't understand what I'm going through? What if they think I'm weird or woo or whatever the fears are? So that's been a big one. It would be inconceivable 3 or 4 years ago that I would be on a podcast sharing this story in this way. As you said, I had been writing on social media, my journey, and I was never one to really share except, the family vacation type stuff. And it definitely got me. It's every time I do it, it's like, oh God, I can see some friends, I imagine someone from high school or college going, what is this guy, whatever the judgment is. And it's just projection. It's projection. And now I have come to the perspective that, yeah, I'm not for everybody. I'm not for everybody, but only by sharing our authentic selves can, the analogy of the lighthouse, like people won't see who we are without being real. So yeah, that's my big one is that one.
And my thought as you say that
Speaking
is
truth.
Be yourself, and the hearts that are meant to love you will. And I wish I could claim that line.
Exactly.
I can't, but I love it. Let's give our listeners one of your best ideas for helping them move closer to alignment with purpose or their authenticity or some of the things we discussed. Like, is there like a nice thing that you or thought or an exercise, a journaling exercise prompt, whatever, to help people today they could use right now listening to this episode?
Yeah. And I'd say before I give a specific exercise is just to know that you're on a journey. I was on a rush, like, hey, if I could just figure it out, then I'll just go do it. Just tell me what I'm really meant to do, and then I'll figure it out. And what I've come to realize is it is a windy road of self-discovery, and it takes trust. It takes listening to intuition. So that's the first thing I would say is don't be in a hurry and enjoy the journey. And yeah, I guess I mentioned it earlier. I'd say one exercise that I just did it 2 days ago on the plane ride back from my retreat that I did, is this vision letter. So this vision letter, what I would suggest you do is you can pick a time frame in the future, whether it's a year or 6 months. Do this after you are in a good state. It's not like something you do in a rush, but maybe after you've gone on an exercise or a walk or meditation where you're just in a grounded state, put on some music and I definitely recommend doing this in a journal or on a piece of paper versus, on the computer. You put yourself in that place, and that future you is writing you today a letter and telling you everything that's unfolded and that's happening as if it's already happening, right? So this is a really powerful distinction, which is when you say, hey, it's whatever, March of 2026, and you wanted to make this big move, and I want to let you know everything is working out perfect. You have found, you're more connected to purpose. You have more vitality. And I would focus on the energetic states than the specifics of whatever your situation is that you want to move towards. But to say, how are you feeling in that moment? What's happening? You're feeling like, so when I wrote that for me months before we actually moved, I just said, hey, oh my God, you did it. You made the leap, you've landed. And I described everything from how I was feeling, the kind of people we were meeting, but even to the kind of house that we wanted to live in, the neighborhood. I could just picture it all. And at some point I'll have to share it with you. I reread that vision letter recently. And if I made 20 different visions of aspects of what I wanted to, 19 happened. It's uncanny. And so the vision letter, I would say, would be the one thing you do, and then you put it in an envelope, set yourself a reminder for 6 months in the future, and keep tuning into the why and the vision, and move into the trust about the step by step. Because I think that's where I used to get really caught up, is trying to figure out exactly how to make each step happen. And the vision letter is a powerful way to help you connect to what you really want to experience as if it's already happened. And then you'll be surprised. People who do this are always surprised how much happens and how much more beyond what they even imagine happens.
John, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. You always have so many interesting takes, and you're very open and honest, and I really appreciate that. And I hope our listeners enjoyed our conversation. Some things that jumped out to me in the course of our chat today. A few concepts here, like you are worthy. It's so vital. Like you are worthy. Have some self-compassion, some self-care, some self-love around that concept. You are absolutely worthy. This concept and notion of trust, sometimes it's really hard to have. And I get it. I'm sure John would get it too. But trust the journey that you're on. Trust that things will open up for you. Trust that the decision you made will work. It can be very challenging. I totally relate to that, but it's a really important element. I love this concept of that you said success for you was being the best version of me, of being you, John Binder. Like that was super important. Being of service, authentic connections, a community. That concept came up a couple times today. I'm going to try to paraphrase or quote what you said. I didn't want to be myself because of my fears. Wow. That's just so deep and powerful, and really wonderful that you shared that. Think about your learnings, right? Like what matters beyond our conditioning? What's really, really fundamentally important to you? What does my heart want? What does my authentic truth need to say to the world? Community, this concept of community when in transition is really powerful, whether you're coming out of addiction or alcohol abuse or becoming a new parent, new mom, you lost your spouse, whatever it is, there are communities to help you with your transition. And finally, the vision letter is a concept for folks to put into place today. Go write that letter, go somewhere quiet and write yourself that letter 6 months out, tuck it away and set a reminder. So really good stuff today, John. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And if you'd like to learn more about how you can reimagine and redefine what's possible in your career and life, please visit our website, Moore's website at morecareerwellness.com. That's M-O-R-E, careerwellness.com. We're building a destination for accomplished professionals at Crossroads who are ready to redefine what's possible and make some changes. If you go to our website, we have a couple of freebies for you, if you will. We have an exercise workbook that will help you get on a path to purpose and self-discovery. And we also offer on Tuesdays a complimentary workshop and a purpose discovery discussion to give you something of value and help give you a sense about what we can do and hopefully help you with things that you're thinking about. As always, please rate and review Code 3 Life Reinvented wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to reach me, don't hesitate to email me at hello@morecareerwellness.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts, whatever they are. And remember, life doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It waits for the brave one. I'm AJ Jones. This is Code 3 Life Reinvented. Until next time, keep growing, keep choosing you, and keep redefining what's possible.